Now, let's talk about the removal of fuel subsidy and government intervention. I'm joined on the program by the Executive Governor of Ogun State, Dapo Abiodun. Remember, you can send in your questions using the hashtag first 100 days, tag at TVC News NG and at Nifemi Oguntoye. Your Excellency, thank you for joining us on the program. Let's begin with a few questions Nigerians are curious about. You and your colleagues at the National Economic Council resolved to do away with the National Social Register used by the previous administration. But you know, some experts say it's one of the best data science projects done in the country, designed with international parameters and metrics. What exactly is wrong with this document?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I would want to first clarify that at no point in time did my colleagues and I decide, alongside with the federal government, as much as I know, did we decide to discard the social register that was put in place by the federal government under the previous administration. That is not correct. That is misinformation. What was discussed at the National Economic Council was that some states are not very comfortable and are not sure of the integrity of the social register in their states. So if a state governor believes his social register is suspect, it does not amount to the entire social register for the 36 states being suspect. So I would like to clarify and correct that.
So we understand, Mr. Governor, that the register was built by the state ministries of planning. Of course, it was facilitated by the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office and was supported by the World Bank. I'm just curious about what's the plan now, particularly for Ogun State. Are you creating a new register?
Well, let me tell you, what we've done in Ogun State is that we created our own register alongside with the register that was created by the federal government. Because we feel that as a subnational, we are closer to the grassroots and we're able to better enumerate the poor, the elderly, and the vulnerable better than anyone that would attempt to do that all the way from Abuja with in partnership with a few people from our state. So we've always had our own register because we've always implemented a social welfare program that allowed us to reach out to this category of people at different points in time. Of course, the last being when we had the Naira redesign and cashless policy. So in Ogun State, what we aim to do is to dust that register and use it to reach out to those that are in that category at this particular time that they need that support and assistance the most.
Give us an idea. Give us an idea of the number of people captured in your register, your social register, as we speak.
I couldn't tell you that number precisely on top of my head, but I know that we had in the past, as a matter of fact, from the time when we had the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, we had begun to aggressively pursue and ensure that we have our poor, elderly, and vulnerable are properly captured, so that we ensure that only those that are eligible enjoy the benefits of social intervention.
Interesting.
So I'm not quite sure exactly how many we have on top of my head.
We'll get to what the state government palliatives are in a moment, but the fuel subsidy removal itself came with the promise that government will put the money into better use. Has this subsidy money started to reflect in your federal allocation?
Well, let me also explain that, particularly coming from a background of having been in the oil sector before I became governor, I understand the dynamics and the workings of the oil industry. For so many years, the federal government had subsidized the pricing of petroleum products. Gradually, we began to remove subsidy from some of them, from the kerosene called DPK to automotive gas oil called diesel. And then finally, thankfully, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu audaciously and decisively on his inaugural speech removed the subsidy on PMS, which is petrol. Until then, the subsidy had become a 4 trillion naira hole. And let me remind you that these were funds that we didn't have. These were borrowed funds. And of course, by June of this year, we didn't have any more budgetary provision to continue to support subsidy. So something had to happen. And many people have criticized the fact that we should have done some things before subsidy was removed. The truth is that we know ourselves very well in Nigeria. We know that people want to take advantage of the system. Once you announce that you are removing subsidy in a month or 2 months, immediately you see that marketers will stop selling. They want to hoard the products they have so they can sell at an arbitrage and make that margin. So it was quite laudable that our president announced that subsidy removal and caught everyone by surprise. Now, having done that, what we've seen that has done, there were 2 things that the president did. The president removed subsidy and subsequently unified, the exchange rate. So what that did immediately for the country was that all that which the NNPC had deprived the federation of immediately began to come in. So NNPC would, in the past, engage in different optional ways of bringing petrol in because they had gone from becoming the supply of last resort.
I'm sorry to cut in, Mr. Governor. I'm trying to make good use of this time so I can ask you as many questions as possible. I'm not quite sure you got my question. I just wanted to know if from the last federal allocation you got, there has been an increment based on the money from the full subsidy removal.
Yes. To answer your question precisely, yes.
All right.
I was going to answer it, but by inference. But yes, the federal allocation has increased, and that is not due to just subsidy removal alone. The FAC allocation is a reflection of the revenue that is being earned by both the federal government and the federation, and that revenue comes from, yes, the fact that NNPC is no longer subsidizing petrol, but at the same time, it also comes in from the fact that there's been a unification of the naira. So in the past, when NNPC would sell our crude and remit funds to federation at 450, they are now remitting those funds at 750 or thereabouts.
All right. Now that the monies are coming in, let us quickly get to the Ogun State government intervention plan. 10,000 for public servants and pensioners for 3 months in the first instance. We understand that begins this month. But what's the plan for those who are outside the public service?
Well, let me tell you what we've done boldly is to begin the implementation of a framework that we discussed and agreed at the National Economic Council in line with Mr. President's sense of direction. And our hope is that if at the public sector space, which is the civil servants and public servants, we begin this implementation, the private sector would not have much choice but to follow suit. That's exactly what we're hoping. Now, you know that once the public sector begin to grumble, you feel the ripple effect. It goes, it's like a wildfire in Hamatan. So once we're able to give them a sense of belonging and they are at the engine room of government, when they are looked after, and knowing that this 10,000 was not arbitrary. I didn't just sit down or wake up on the wrong side of the bed and decide that I was going to give them 10,000. We sat down with our labor unions, the GNC and the TUC and the NLC, and we all agreed that this was something that if we did, would go a long way into ameliorating the pains that is occasioned by the removal of the subsidy and increased transport prices.
Are you extending it beyond 3 months, or it's just a one-off payment for the next 3 months?
Well, why we've decided to implement this in the first 3 months, in the first instance, is that we're hoping that more sustainable measures that we're putting in place would have kicked in. And if they haven't kicked in, if we are not able to implement them within those 3 months, we'll extend it by another 3 months. And we're definitely sure that in the next 3 months, that the more sustainable plans that we have, which also will be supported by the federal government, would have kicked in. So we wouldn't have to begin to, this 10,000 is just a stopgap measure until all other plans that we have begin to unfold.
You also talked about working out modalities of ensuring that 20% of your staff strength are off duty daily. So on an average, how many days should public servants be looking forward to go to work in Ogun?
Well, see, what we did was, in coming up with this allowance, this transport allowance, we had to sort of back into it. So we sat down with a cross-section of our public servants and said, how much more are you now spending to go to work? We realized that we couldn't underwrite the entire cost difference between pre-regulation and post-regulation. So we now began to tinker with those numbers until we arrived at 10,000 naira. So to support them further, we now decided that only 80% of them would need to be at work at any point in time. So 20% would be off work. And that determination is between the various PAMSECs, directors, and heads of ministry, department of agencies. So at least at any point in time, we have 80% of our workforce at work. So that means I don't have to come to work on particular would have saved them an additional amount, which adds to 10,000 naira a month transport allowance.
Well, I'm sure we'll get the details when the modalities are worked out. We have to go now, Governor, but if you can do this in a minute, quite a number of our viewers are concerned about where your attention would turn in your second term in office, particularly about construction of roads in border towns in places like Mowe and Ibafo. What are your plans in this regard?
Well, as you know, in line with my Ishaya development plan, I is the infrastructure part of that. And I believe we've done extremely well in that space. We've constructed over 400 kilometers of roads now in our first 4 years. And the intention is to sustain that. We've paid particular attention to our border towns, Mowe, Ibafo, Djibouti, Udogolu, and all those border towns. So we'll continue to ensure that we're able to move people effortlessly between neighboring states and our states. And of course, our neighboring states are Lagos and Oyo State particularly. So all those routes that would allow us to move more people to Ogun State, to live in Ogun State, and work in Lagos, will continue to pay them priority attention. But more importantly, besides roads, our priority these next 4 years will be on public utility. We're determined to provide uninterrupted power supply and to ensure that more people in Ogun State enjoy the supply of potable water.
We're looking forward to that.
Thank you very much.
We're also going to get back to you in the coming days. We're counting down to your first 100 days in office, and perhaps we'll return to have that conversation again when it's day 100. Ogun State Governor Dapo Abiodun, thank you so much for talking to us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's our program today. You can watch a repeat broadcast at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. See you again, sir.